This is Nausicaa, Odyssey 6, sections 5 and 6. That is lines 85 to 104, I think. So Nausicaa and her maids have set off in the cart with the clothes which they are going to wash in the river. And we have river here in line 85. Potamos is a word you know. It's got a very strange ending. This oio ending is a genitive ending in Homer. So we have hote here, which is a word you know, meaning when, and the high, the feminine article, tells us that we're referring to the girls, Nausicaa and her maids. So when the girls, here's the verb, it's not aphikonto, which is what you're used to in Attic Greek, they arrived, it's just hikonto without the prefix. When they arrived at, now if this was normal Attic Greek you'd have a preposition like pros or ace. When they arrived at the stream, and this is an adjective, perikalea, the very beautiful, you can see kalos in the middle of this word, when they arrived at the very beautiful stream of the river. The next line then, entha, where there were, esan, plunoi. Now plunoi are, we're going to have to translate it as washing places, which isn't a fantastic translation, I admit, but it refers to, they're probably sort of stone troughs, large stone troughs, over which, or through which, the water from the river would flow. Man-made, probably, although I suppose it could be sort of created out of natural rocks around the river, where there were washing places. Here's the adjective to describe these washing places, and it means permanently flowing. It's non-stop. This water just keeps gushing and gushing 24/7. Now you have to remember that the land of the Phaeacians is portrayed by Homer as a sort of paradise on earth, an idyll where everything is in harmony. The relationships in the palace between the royal family are very harmonious. Nature is beautiful and unthreatening. You might ask, why does Homer portray the land of the Phaeacians as this earthly paradise? One reason that has been suggested is that it's a foil to Ithaca, Odysseus' home, where chaos reigns, basically because Odysseus has been absent for so many years. So we have here in the land of the Phaeacians an example of how life, civilized life, should be lived, and how on Ithaca, Odysseus' home, it will be lived once Odysseus has sorted out the chaos. So, where there were permanently flowing washing places, remember, sort of, they're not going to wash the water in the sea, of course, because the sea is salt water. They need fresh water, and there's obviously a river that flows into the sea, and at that point where the freshwater river enters the sea is the point where Odysseus has been washed ashore, and where the meeting is going to take place between Nausicaa and Odysseus. Remember also that a fresh water supply in a country with the climate of Greece is another unusual thing, and it points to the perfection of this country, the land of the Phaeacians. So where there were permanently flowing washing places, and polu hudor, a great deal of water, abundant water. Remember that Hudor is a neuter noun, and Polu therefore is the neuter adjective, agreeing with it. Abundant water. And look at, there's another adjective at the beginning of the next line describing the water. It's not just abundant water, it is fine, I suppose we might say pure, clear water. Neuter again. So, and abundant, clear water. Then we have a very strange verb. The verb is reo at the end, which is to flow. But in front of that verb we have no less than 3 prefixes. We have hyupo, which is from under, we have ek, which is out, and we have pro, which is forward. So a great deal of clear water flows from under out at this point. To clean, or so as to clean, the verb is kathairo, and that's an infinitive, it's an aorist infinitive. So as to clean, rupaonta, neuter plural, dirty things, mala, dirty things, even very dirty clothes. So this supply of water, these washing places, can clean the dirtiest of clothes. Going back to this verb, hyup, ek, pro, reo, it's very unusual to find a verb with 3 such prefixes. Strangely enough, there is another such verb in the next line. We'll come to in a second. So, when the girls got to the river, where there were washing places and a lot of water, then enther means different from this enther. Enther in line 2 here is where. Enther here in line 4 is then. Then Haiger, the girls, Elusan, released the mules, apenes, from the cart. But they released again, this verb is hyup ek pro luo, to release from under, out of, forward. So the girls release the mules from under the yoke. But it's interesting, isn't it, that a very unusual combination of prefixes should be employed by Homer on 2 successive lines. And the suggestion might be that just as in nature, the water flows from under out, so the girls release the oxen from under out, and it's as if the action of the girls is in harmony with the action of nature, and that harmony is suggested by the use of the very same 3 prefixes. Okay, then the next sentence, line 89. Here's the verb siwan. It's like many Homeric verbs. It's lost its augment, and I suppose they drove the oxen. Sorry, not oxen. The mules, aren't they? Mules are feminine, and they drove the mules alongside the swirling river. So the girls released the mules from the cart, and then let them graze by the river. In fact, the grazing is in the next line. Trogain, to graze on honey sweet grass. And again, we have this picture of the land of the Phaeacians as an idyllic place. It's you can imagine one of these films where it's a lovely sunny day and spring day, and nature is overflowing with with new growth, and this is the picture. And we have these young girls equally growing up, beautiful, and we assume they're beautiful girls as well. Nature is beautiful. This is the picture. The the paradise on earth which Homer portrays the land of the Phaeacians to be. Tide. Tie is the same really as high. It's the girls. The girls from the cart took the clothes, hemata, in their hands and carried the clothes into the dark, the black water. And they, this is the verb stabo, and they trod the clothes. We understand hemata, and they trod the clothes in the pools, nimbly. Notice the deliberate repetition of the B sound here, stabon den bothroisi. Now, I know there are only two B's there, but that's a little attempt by Homer at onomatopoeia. We are meant to hear the sound of the girls using the soles of their feet to stamp on the clothes and help the process of cleaning. And in the same way as stamp in English has got a P and a B, remember, are very similar sounds, both labials, both plosives, and they suggest the stamping of the girls' feet on the ground as they clean the clothes. So they stamp, they tread, they stamp on, they tread the clothes in the pools, nimbly. Thotos is an adverb here. And then we have two last words in the line, erida. Now eris is competition, and proferusi we can see as a participle, and it's feminine plural describing the girls. They are engaging in a competition. Now, obviously some competition can be very serious and very tough and aggressive. This is playful competition between the girls, and they are, I suppose, they're just sort of seeing who can clean the clothes fastest, and there's just a little bit of playful competition between them. Autar is a conjunction that comes up quite a lot. I think it's nothing really much more than when. Just nothing much more than just and, really, or but. Here probably just and. And when, this is the verb, they cleaned. We'd probably say they had cleaned. It's lost its augment again. It should be eplunan. And when they had cleaned, kathairo is another verb meaning to cleanse. I think we'd probably say wash and clean. Yes, when they had washed and cleaned all the dirt. What do they do in the next line? Interesting word, xas. Doesn't look like it, but it's an adverb, and it means in a row. Petasan is the verb. It should be epatasan. The augment's gone again. They spread them out. They spread the clothes out in a row by the edge of the sea. So they take them from the river and they spread them out by the edge of the sea, where, strange word, erki, where particularly, malista, I suppose we might say something like just where the sea washes the pebbles clean. Poti kerson, I would just say on the shore. So having washed the clothes by the river, they then spread them out on a sort of, notice we've got this word laingas, meaning pebbles, where the sea washes the pebbles clean on the shore. So what you don't want is any sand. You've just cleaned your clothes, and then you want to lay them out on a sort of shingle, a shingly beach, where there's no sand, and where the newly washed clothes aren't going to be contaminated with lots of sand. So the girls choose the correct spot to lay the clothes out in a row. They've obviously done it before, and the Malister, where in particular the sea washes the pebbles clean. Okay, so they are, and Malister is of course emphasised by its position there at the end of the line, so they know exactly where to lay the clothes out. It's where the sea in particular washes the pebbles clean. So in the next section, section 6, Haide, again, feminine plural, the girls. And the girls, we have here now a couple of participles, middle participles, having washed themselves. Middle verbs are often sort of the equivalent of reflexive verbs in French, having washed themselves. And interesting verb here, cridsdo, having rubbed themselves. Lippa is an adverb meaning liberally, having rubbed themselves liberally with olive oil, elion. If you remember, Arete, Nausicaa's mother, has supplied them with some olive oil, and the girls use the olive oil as a sort of soap, but also as a sort of moisturiser. So they take the opportunity when they're cleaning the clothes to clean themselves as well. So having washed and having, you can say, anointed themselves, if you like, liberally with olive oil, then, this is epeta, then they had their meal. I think they had their picnic, is what I would say, by the banks of the river. There's potamoia, that genitive ending again. And they waited. There should be menon, meno, I wait. The augment's omitted again, and it's the imperfect tense. And they waited for the clothes, hemata, tesemenai. It's an infinitive in actual fact. It's a passive infinitive. To be dried. To be dried by the rays. It's a dative singular. We'll translate it as a plural. By the rays of the sun. Now you know in Attic Greek the word is helios. Okay, now this is Homeric Greek, which is different, although manifestly the same language, and the breathing is now a smooth breathing. An epsilon has been added, and we have that strange genitive ending, oio, again. So they waited for the clothes to be dried in the rays of the sun. Now, of course, this delay while the clothes dry won't take too long, mind you. You're talking about an hour max. Has to be filled, and the girls are going to fill this time with again. And autar again, and when, interesting verb here, it's terpomai. When they, the augment's omitted, when they had, well in fact there is a subject, Demoai are the maids, and auter herself means Nausicaa herself. And when the maids, and Nausicaa herself, had enjoyed, the verb terpomai means to enjoy, had enjoyed their food, their picnic. Now, interestingly, this same verb, terpomai, will be repeated at the bottom of the line here. There it is, terpomener. Now, that's when the simile has started, when Nausicaa is compared with the goddess Artemis. Now, Homer has deliberately used the same verb here in line 99 as in the narrative to describe Nausicaa and the girls, and here again in line 104 at the bottom to describe Artemis. And this verbal repetition is used by Homer to tie the narrative to the simile, and to show one of the correspondences. When you talk about a simile in Homer, you have to tell the examiner what corresponds to what. Now, obviously, some are very obvious. Nausicaa will correspond to the goddess Artemis, and the enjoyment of the picnic corresponds to Artemis's enjoyment. We don't know what Artemis is enjoying yet. When we get there in line 104, it will be revealed. So let's go back to 99. When the maids and Nausicaa herself had enjoyed their food, what did they do? Epaidston. Now, paidsto is the verb, obviously connected with pais, a child. It's the imperfect tense, and the imperfect tense can be translated as they began to, and that's what we'll say here. They began to play, and they began to play svaire, with a ball, a sphere, we'll say, with a ball. Having thrown off their veils, credemna. Now, I'm not sure veil is quite the right word. They obviously wear some sort of scarf around their heads, rather like, I think, sort of Muslim women do today. And now the girls, because they want to play without sort of clothing in their way, they take their headscarves off, it's interesting that sort of in male company, in high society, in the palace where they're used to being, they would have to wear these headscarves to show their modesty, as it were. But now, on the beach, when they're away from the high society of the palace, when they're away from male company, they can dispense with their headscarves, and they play unself-consciously. They're just without any self-consciousness. They're just happy, innocently playing ball on the beach. Interestingly enough, if they'd known that Odysseus, a man, was nearby, they wouldn't have put their veils aside, their headscarves aside. So, line 101, and we have Nausicaa named here. We have an adjective describing Nausicaa. She's white-armed, leukemia. Well, this is leukolanos. She's white-armed, and it's quite a common adjective. Notice it must be one of these two-termination adjectives. Leukolanos is not masculine, as it looks. It's feminine, describing Nausicaa. And she's white-armed, of course. It shows her high status. If she doesn't have a tan because she's a princess, and she probably doesn't leave the palace very much. She certainly doesn't have to work in the sunshine. Things have changed these days in the 21st century, but in the past, noble women prized their white skin. Now it's almost the opposite. Sort of a tan is a sign of wealth. It was the opposite in the past. Pale skin was the sign of wealth. So Nausicaa, white-armed Nausicaa. Here's the verb archomai. Led the game. It takes a genitive here, molper. Led the game. Tersi. I think archomai here, led the girls. It's a dative, but we'll translate it as an accusative. White-armed Nausicaa led the girls in the game. Now, this verb, archomai, then, shows that Nausicaa is the dominant figure, by her status as a princess, but also she's an adventurous girl, and she's leading her maids. So then we have Artemis, and so all of a sudden Homer introduces a simile, and a simile is a feature of epic poetry. and it's a way for the poet to compare one thing with another. And in this case, he compares Nausicaa with the goddess Artemis. And we'll say something like, just as Artemis goes. This is not Amy Sum, this is Amy Ebo, third person singular. Just as Artemis goes through the mountains. And this is a feminine adjective, clearly, and it means arrow shooter. Just as Artemis the arrow shooter goes through the mountains. Now, Artemis is the goddess of hunting, and she's portrayed here hunting in the mountains, hunting for deer and boar. Now, there are a number of correspondences between the simile and the narrative here. Artemis obviously equals Nausicaa, but Artemis is also famously, she is a virgin goddess, unmarried, as is Nausicaa. That's another connection between the two, and you can see Artemis in some ways as an early feminist figure. She's a very independent woman. She doesn't need a man, she doesn't want a man, she's not defined by her relationship to other men. She's proud of her virginity. It's a badge of honour, and she's also a tough huntswoman, a match for any man. And this tells us, so that's how this goddess Artemis is portrayed. She's always, if you see her portrayed in art, she's always got a bow and a quiver of arrows over her shoulder, because she is the hunter goddess. But it tells us something about Nausicaa as well. When Homer says Nausicaa was just like Artemis, there are some obvious connections. Their status as unmarried virgins is one, but there's also this idea of adventurous, tough, feminist, proto-feminist figure. And Artemis is enjoying herself hunting boar and deer, just as Nausicaa is enjoying herself on the beach. That's another part of the comparison. Obviously, you won't see it in this section, but in the next section we discover that Artemis is accompanied by some nymphs. Now, these nymphs correspond obviously to Nausicaa's maids. Now, you'll have to point out these correspondences between the simile and the narrative, the story of Nausicaa, to the examiner. So, these last two lines then, Artemis, we're still in the simile now, Artemis, the arrow shooter, is going through the mountains, and then Homer in the penultimate line here says, either through Mount Taygetos, and Mount Taygetos is very high, Perimakatos, or Mount Erymanthus. Now, these are two Greek mountains where Artemis might be hunting. Greece, don't forget, is a very mountainous country. Last line, enjoying, rejoicing in, tepomai. Now, I've mentioned to you this verb deliberately repeated by Homer. Rejoicing in boar and swift deer. I suppose we'll say something like rejoicing in chasing boar and swift deer. So, the end of this section leaves us halfway through this simile. We'll carry on and finish the simile when we do sections 7 and 8. See you then.